Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing really awesome today. It's lovely to be here with you. Before we actually begin, we're going to start with our centering and then we're going to jump right into it. So let's stay seated, get yourself pretty much comfortable. You can close your eyes if you want. If you want to keep them softly open, that's fine too. And we're going to move into the space of noticing. Just noticing where our breath is at, where your mind is at. How does your body feel? What's the length of your breath? So do a little count of your inhales and your exhales. Noticing if your inhales are longer than the exhales or vice versa. And are you in a space where you're breathing through the nostrils? Let's start to scan our body a little. We all tend to hold tension in different spaces. So let's start at the top of your heads and float it all the way through, just noticing where you might be holding any tension. And again, we're just in that space of noticing. So having that connection with our mind and body and breath. And now let's return to the breath here. Let's see if we can make a couple changes. Now let's try lengthening the breath. So wherever your count was, you can add maybe 2 or 3. And if you're feeling that you are in a space where you need to be a little bit more relaxed, you can try to lengthen the exhales. I know for some of us, it's around the middle of the day, and maybe you might want to bring a little bit more energy because you might be in that midday kind of slump. We often think that it's always that we want to move into that space of relaxation. Some of us want to add a little bit of energy and vigor. And if that's where you're at, you can consider lengthening your inhales. So bring in some energy. And then let's take the breath, direct it into those spaces in our body where we may be holding that tension. And just feel those areas start to soften. Just bringing some ease to where you are. And we're going to circle back around to the mind. And if your mind was feeling a bit full, you can take the awareness to the breath. So if you're feeling like, oh, I want to think about this or think about that, bring the awareness to your breath so your focus is just there on the breath. And then take our breath back to whatever feels good and normal for you. You're slowly going to let those eyes flutter open. If they were softly open, you can open them with a little bit more energy. Okay. And welcome again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. Like I said before, I'm joined here by my colleague, Kelly Freeman, and she's I am the marketing. She's the membership manager at IAYT. I'm Marita Greenidge, and I am the marketing communications manager at IAYT. And so delighted that we have Cheryl Albright here with us. She is an occupational therapist and a certified yoga therapist. She owns Soul to Soul Yoga, located in Bradenton, Florida, and Asheville, North Carolina. And she provides yoga therapy, occupational therapy, and continuing educational classes internationally using yoga in clinical practice. She also educates on topics such as trauma, sensory processing, limited language, yoga for scleroderma, and chronic health conditions. So she is the author of a recent blog post on yogatherapy.health. You can go visit that blog post. You just type in yogatherapy.health. And it's titled, Your Doctor Told You to Try Yoga, Now What? And I feel like many people can relate to that. I love that title. And she was also featured in a profile piece in the summer 2025 issue of Yoga Therapy Today. And it's a very interesting art. I read it before. I wanted to refresh before I interviewed and revisited it. I'm like, I copied and pasted a couple things because there are a lot of gems in that article. Thank you for that, Cheryl. So welcome again. Happy to be here with you. And Cheryl, the post begins with the common scenario. Someone's doctor says, try yoga. And, sometimes it's said very casually because we've all heard this before. Someone says, try yoga. But that advice sometimes leaves people feeling confused or even overwhelmed. So what does it really mean when your doctor says, try yoga?
It depends. It depends on what condition they're saying, try yoga for. Let's say, I'm a woman of a certain age, and so we'll say that, they say it for anxiety. Oh, just try because hormone fluctuations do some crazy stuff to the body. And so they go take a yoga class. But what does that mean? What type of yoga are they talking about? Does that mean, there's 8 limbs? Most people don't know that. They just think it's just the physical piece of it. Where are you supposed to go? Who am I supposed to trust? And, the real reason behind the article was that a lot of people will say, go take yoga. They take a yoga class and they think the yoga teacher is an expert in something. And I hesitate with that. Just the 200 hours means you've had a month of training. 500 hours means you've had a couple additional months. The IAYT says you have had even more. You've had at least 1,000 plus. I forget all the credentials for that now, but it's changed recently. And so what does that mean? And what do all the, the alphabet soup after my last name means? It's like, who are you supposed to go to? And then you look at, okay, well, this yoga studio is near me and they offer a slow flow and vinyasa something. And, what does all of that language even mean? So where are they supposed to start? They're supposed to start with what's restorative, what's yin, and then a lot of people will just give up because they're like, this is too much information. They didn't say what type of yoga to go do. They didn't say what kind of yoga to try. So maybe they try some things online and they're just like, it's not for me. And which kind of came to why I made some free videos on my website. I had patients, inpatient, that were like, what am I supposed to do? And depending on the person, I could recommend a style, but it was kind of like, well, you know what? Here it is. Here's something to get you started, at least until you find something or someone. And so, yeah, I've heard it for anything from stress and anxiety to low back pain, increase flexibility if people get really stiff. At this point, I've heard a lot.
You know, it is overwhelming for anything. I mean, it's not just yoga, because we tend to get like a lot of advice. You go to healthcare professionals and they say just go do this, so I get why it's over, and I completely understand what you just mentioned, because when someone says that, it is, where do you begin? And for a lot of us, we go back to, like, what are a lot of these cultural norms associated with what they've told us. And for yoga, they see and they imagine it as, like, it's fitness classes. There are all these videos, and so that's what they're thinking. And then they see all of these kind of like pretzel type kind of, and they're like, whoa, this is what they're telling me to try. But can you then like share like how yoga therapy differs from this general studio class that people might be accustomed to seeing?
It's tailored to you. I mean, it's therapy, right? So it's not just, or it's tailored to a condition. So if it's in a group situation, they may have yoga therapy for X, Y, and Z. And it's tailored toward you and what you want to get out of it. And so it's kind of like a teacher. Well, I use the school analogy because I've done some work in schools. So you have a teacher, but then you have the OT and the PT and the reading specialist and all these other things that help support that individual, right? So you have a yoga teacher, and then a therapist helps support the areas within a yoga framework that you want to address. And so, using all 8 limbs and not just the physical postures, and maybe a little pranayama or the breathing practices, and really, what are your ultimate, like, what is the goal that you want? A lot of times when I do an evaluation, if I could wave my magic wand, what would you want? Like, what is your ultimate goal? And sometimes, being completely pain-free really isn't ideal or realistic. It's more like okay, so we have to live with this thing, this chronic condition, and how can we make you the most comfortable in the body that you have right now?
So the yoga teacher is kind of like the starting point of the teacher in the school that offers a broad education, and then there's these other specialists like the yoga therapist who can come in and offer the tailored treatment to really address what the client or clients are experiencing. Cheryl, you are also an occupational therapist, and I'm guessing that probably came before the yoga therapy. I may be wrong, but can you share a bit of what inspired you to blend occupational therapy with yoga therapy in your own career?
So I had been out of school for about 6 years and was kind of going, okay, now what? ADHD brain. I was getting bored and was just like, okay, so this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And back in the day, we used to get a circular that would come in the mail called Advanced. And it was for, they'd have it for physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech, all the allied health professionals. And they'd have articles and stuff in there. But in the back, there was always the continuing ed. And at the time, it was called Yoga for the Special Child. And it was a week in Florida. And I was like, oh, that sounds nice. I had no idea what I was walking into. I had absolutely no clue. I had maybe done a couple yoga videos and stretching, whatever, in college, but it wasn't really, I wouldn't call it a consistent practice by any means. My roommate had a VHS tape, if that if we want to really date ourselves. So, you know, it was kind of like, well, a week in Florida sounds nice. I'll learn how to work with the kids and it'll be great. That is not what it was. And I still study with them to this day. It's called Yoga for All Abilities. But they, yeah, it was kind of like that was my introduction. And so I went back to the school that I was working for and thought, well, they may not like this for everybody. So I picked certain individuals. There was one young lady with a disorder called Rett syndrome. And I'm not sure if they still have that under the autism umbrella or not, but it's a degenerative disorder. So eventually you start losing the ability to walk and talk and all the things. And so for her, she started losing the skills. Mom was worried because she wasn't getting up and down off the floor independently anymore. She wasn't feeding herself. And all the current literature in the OT world said, just maintain their skills that they have. And I was like, well, what does that mean? I don't understand what that's supposed to mean. And so I said, well, it can't hurt. And so I tried this method with this individual. And eventually, what was really cool to see is within that disorder, they call it writhing movement. So you might see hands kind of waving near their face. And her hands like stopped doing that for brief periods of time. And she would walk over to billboards like she had never seen them before because her hands weren't waving in her face and she could actually like take stuff in. So long story short, we were able to get her up and down off the floor again. We adapted. So blending the OT piece, I adapted the way she fed herself and positioning. And am I going to cure this disorder? No, but it was getting her in the most comfortable place that I could for where she was at. And I think the breath was the key because their breathing patterns changed because the information going to the diaphragm, that's ultimately how they end up passing away, is that their brain stops communicating with their lungs and heart at some point. And so I think the breath kept things going. I mean, this was 2010 maybe. So I don't know how she's doing now, but it was just kind of my gateway. And I was just like, well, it's working for me and it's working for this individual. There's got to be something behind this. And so I just kept studying from there.
I think, you know, for so many yoga therapists, we are just really propelled to constant learning. And, you know, we're so interested in the information that we just want to absorb more. I know that as a, you know, younger yoga teacher, I was just magnetically pulled forward into further study because it's so fascinating and the potential that it has to really help people. And the breath work, like as you said, it's such a powerful tool that can help people with many, many, many issues. Can you share a little bit how you collaborate with other physicians, other therapists, or other professionals in your client care, and how a yoga therapist who's not already working in healthcare might do so?
Yeah, so being part of the treatment team, really understanding that your own scope of practice and what you bring to the table helps clear up some of the ambiguity that goes on with, I mean, physicians don't know to say, hey, you need a yoga therapist. They just don't. And so when it came to the pediatric world, there was one physician in Florida that would constantly send me children. She just liked my assessments. I guess I don't really know. I sent her flowers because she at one point had sent me so many clients. I was like, oh, gratitude. But it came down to like nervous system regulation. So it didn't matter if the child was on the spectrum or if we had ADHD, maybe heading toward a psychiatric diagnosis. It was just kind of like, well, I don't really need the label. That's your job. I will give them the tools and strategies, the non-pharmaceutical management of some of these symptoms, and being collaborative in that. And I think this is my personal just observation is like you're either east or west, and I've kind of gotten over that. I was kind of like that in the beginning. I kind of went a little crunchy, and I've come back to the center, but it was kind of like, no, these things can work together. Like, it doesn't have to be, it's not us versus them. It's it's not us versus the medical establishment. I think there's a lot of, well, let's try to get you off all your meds. And that's not our place. unless you have MD after you're, in the alphabet soup, then MD, PA, NP, anybody that could prescribe a drug, we shouldn't be talking about that. And it comes down to, like, how can we support you and how you're feeling today? Not what happened yesterday, not what's going to happen tomorrow, but like right here in this moment. And so then we can take those skills and transfer them off the mat. My goal is that you don't need to see me forever. Here's our plan. Now you need to go do it. Doesn't mean they're not going to come back for tweaking. And some conditions are a lot longer. If it's a developmental disorder, obviously that's development. That's a little different. And then working with other OTs in the community, like, it's not competition. We're all just trying to help people, right? And physical therapists and speech and language pathologists. I had one student, and mom kept saying how the child was doing after our sessions. And so the school was like, can you come in and show us what you're doing? And I did. And it doesn't look like a lot if you don't know what you're looking for, right? And so I don't know. It was just kind of, I felt like I was being like a circus, and I was like, oh, okay. Because you've got all these eyes staring at you, and I'm like, were they looking for a magic wand? I'm not really sure what's happening here. So just being open to the rest of the treatment team and really staying in your lane is my biggest suggestion.
And I think one thing that you really touched on is that we teach practices that our clients can take home and use for their own self-care, but there is a certain degree of responsibility that is placed on that client that, if in order for it to work, you need to do it. It's not going to, the benefits are not going to continue if you have one session and then never practice again. It's something that needs to be tended to and watered.
Yeah, I agree. And I liked what you said before, Cheryl, with like making sure that we understand, like, we're working as a team. It's not that, so it's like complementary. It's not that you're going to say, hey, come do this, and it's going to be something of like a miracle in the next 2 weeks, and then you're completely off your meds, because these are lifestyle changes, and lifestyle changes, take a bit of time. You may be able to gradually come off your meds when you are working within the team, and the doctor, like, I like your whole thing of the alphabet, so the one that has MD is able to say, okay, it looks like you're showing some improvements in these areas. So the improvements be coming maybe from the yoga therapy, you're seeing some improvements. So I'm going to make some changes here to your meds. And I feel like that's like a kind of realistic approach, instead of like, I always get very weary when and this is not just again with yoga, but with anything like finance advice, anything, when people go like, I'm going to make you do this in like a month or like 2 weeks. And it's like, oh, come on now, these things take time. And you did highlight this. This is why I love the line. I pulled this line out of the article because you said, this is the summer YTT article where you said, starting out, I wish I had a better grasp of the truth that it's okay to grow slowly. And I feel like, I know that's not exactly in line with what we were mentioning just now, but that segues into the question that I'm going to go into. But all of these things are kind of interrelated. So even for business, our development it's a process. It's going to take time, but also our business development is going to take time as yoga therapists. So this is something that comes up quite a bit with new CIAYTs, and they're building out their own practices. And I think your story is like a really awesome example, because like you mentioned that your business grew by listening to what it is that people needed. You say you don't rely as much on like advertising, like experience and connection and trust. They go like a lot further. So what I want to get here, particularly for like, and this is not even necessarily just for new yoga therapists, but anyone out there, how did this whole idea of listening to what people needed, understanding that you grow slowly, I know it came later, how did that shape soul to soul yoga? And what advice would you give like newer yoga therapists who are starting out?
There's a couple different strategies that I did. The listening to what people were saying came out of business coaching. And so I had a couple over the years. I had ones that were OT specific, and I've had ones that were just business. So it could be, but this woman seemed to have gravitated a lot of like healing. There's a lot of doulas and a lot of, and at least in my cohort, and a lot of those individuals I still am in contact with. And so we don't do anything remotely like the same, right? Like I was the only one. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I wasn't taught in OT school or yoga training, or because I was grandfathered in for the yoga therapy side. I had no business coaching. My father had his own practice, and it was like you slapped your name on the side of a building and you put your name in the yellow pages, and that was it. Like there wasn't any real mentorship as far as that goes. And so she said, one of the I call it assignments. It felt like I was going back to school at the time, but it talk to your old clients and find out why they hired you. And so she had like a questionnaire. And so I did that with some of the ones, because I originally started in New York. And so I contacted some of them, and I was like, so I have this crazy assignment, like, can you help me out? And it was interesting. So for a long time, the tagline was, we're not just another therapy. And one parent had every therapy discipline. I mean, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, feeding, nutrition, hippo, which is like horse assisted, aquatic, like anything she could find for her daughter, she did. And then the speech therapist is like, you don't have everything. I know this OT over here. And she was like, I wanted something that was fun for her, that she didn't think was just another therapy coming into the house. And I was like, I like that. And so just listening to what people had to say. So that was like the pediatric realm. When it came to adults, was like listening to what adults were saying. I had a couple people along the way that weren't able to get up and down off the floor anymore, and they were about to have grandchildren for the first time. And so it was really important to them that they felt safe enough to not only get up and down off the floor, but holding another human and get up and down off the floor. And so those were fun because they didn't need it for long. It was like, if you do these things that I'm telling you to do, you should be fine. And so, yeah, it was just listening to what people were saying, that their I don't want to say problem points, or I don't know, just what their we'll call it concerns were as far as their physical health. And behavioral health, it's a lot of, they're not sleeping, which is causing their issues to exacerbate. Sleep is the big one. And it was fun because one teenager right in front of the attending was like, I always sleep better after your groups. And I'm like, louder. They need to hear, because like I look at it as the non-pharmaceutical side of like lifestyle management, because yoga really just boils down to a lifestyle. and how, when we come up against something, what is our reaction, both physically and mentally, and what happens when, if you can look at it, the lens through the koshas, you could look, whatever, however you want to hone in on it. But it's like, how are we going to deal with whatever is presented in front of us? And like psychiatric, I think of it as the brain kind of taking over and hijacking the body. They become disconnected. We made a poor choice, and now we're in a hospital. Whatever that poor choice was, whether it was reaching for a substance, whether it was, suicidal ideation, harm to others, whatever the case may be, they will tell you. Sometimes they'll say, I don't even remember that happening. And so complete disassociation. And it doesn't matter what the label is. That could be bipolar, it could be schizophrenia, it could be, and it could be somebody on the spectrum too. So when I look at neurodiversity, I look at all of it. Like, when the brain doesn't function for whatever reason, it fascinates me how it doesn't work. And so how can we get the person back to a place of, I'm okay, and then how do we stay there? Physical, behavioral. The beauty of what we do is we don't have to treat labels, right? Like, we don't make the diagnosis, and we don't really, I don't know that it's helpful for us, like, that we need to know unless people want to disclose. I need to know things like uncontrolled high blood pressure, seizures, like the big ones.
I really like how you approach everything. And even listening to you talk, it feels like a realistic approach to everything, even patient care as well as business, because it's like, it feels like a true definition of meeting people where they're at, and then how do we take them, where they want to be. So I love that whole approach, because you're not coming there. It doesn't feel, honestly, if I come to you, you're gonna paint like this story of like sugar candy mountain kind of reference from Animal Farm. It's like, okay, we are going to get like a realistic approach for how we're going to move forward. And I really like that. I feel like that's important. And it's not all, because a lot of the times too, like with yoga, and I'm saying this also from the marketing perspective and the business marketing perspective, people come and it's like, you hear all these shiny things, social, do this. So that I smile when you say slap your name on the door kind of thing and put it in the pages. And back then, I guess that kind of worked for some people, to be honest, right? But the thing about it doesn't mean that every shiny thing is going to work for you. And it's really just kind of finding like, what is it that works overall for, the persons that you want to work with. So I totally love the approach.
Well, we are getting to the end of our time here. I want to thank you, Cheryl, for joining us, and thank you, Marita, as well. And, just to recap, yoga is not just a one-size-fits-all prescription. And IAYT-certified yoga therapists, or CIAYTs, are highly trained, well beyond the 200 or 500-hour yoga teacher. And they adhere to educational standards and can really provide support that's personalized, safe, as well as therapeutic. And again, another thing that Cheryl mentioned, yoga therapy is intended to complement other forms of healthcare rather than replacing them. It's important to have both sides. It's not an either or, black or white situation. They can both work beautifully together. And collaboration and referral networks between healthcare providers and yoga therapists are key for ensuring that everyone receives the support and care that they need across all areas. So if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow IAYT for more live streams and additional resources on yoga therapy. You can find us on social media. On Instagram, we are at IAYT-org. Facebook is facebook.com/IAYT.org. LinkedIn, you can search International Association of Yoga Therapists. YouTube, we are at IAYT-org. We also have private groups on Facebook for our member schools and IAYT-certified yoga therapists, CIAYTs, so you can join the conversation there. And we have a private group on LinkedIn. And again, if you search International Association of Yoga Therapists, you can find us there. Another great way to stay in touch is to subscribe to our e-newsletter. It's open to everyone, even non-members. You can find the sign up link right on IAYT's homepage at IAYT.org. And of course, we always welcome you to join us as a member if you are a yoga teacher, considering entering the field of yoga therapy, or if you are a client, a potential client who's seeking an IAYT certified yoga therapist, or a student. We have a place for everyone. And check out our public facing website, which is yogatherapy.health. And you can go read Cheryl's blog piece there. All right, take care, and we will see you next time.